Wednesday Addams ran through the darkened hallways. There were very few things in this world that frightened her, but whatever the thing behind her was, it frightened her. She didn't know what it was, but she knew she needed help. She tried every door that lined the long hallway, but each was locked. She banged on the doors as she ran past, but no one answered. Eventually, she was at the end of the hallway, a dead end. As she turned to face whatever it was that was chasing her, she watched as a pair of skeletal hands reached out of the darkness towards her, one of them holding a science textbook. Wednesday Addams woke up to find herself in bed, that same textbook lying in bed next to her. As she got dressed, preparing herself for another day at Nevermore Academy, her unfailingly cheerful roommate and best friend Enid said one of the most terrifying things she had ever heard.
Ready for the test today?
Wednesday's head snapped around to face Enid like she was the protagonist of her favorite comedy, The Exorcist.
Tomorrow's test?
Enid laughed at this, giggling for a moment before her eyes widened in genuine concern.
Oh, no, you're not joking. The botany test is today. Did you forget?
Wednesday flipped through the black leather-bound planner on her desk and called for Thing. She searched for the offending hand. It skittered across her desk nervously, shifting from one finger to the other as Wednesday asked whether it had taken down the notes she dictated to it. It was avoiding the question. Not a good sign. Thing pushed a sticky note across the desk toward Wednesday. There, in her own handwriting, was written the incriminating words, "Test Monday, don't forget." So it wasn't Thing's mistake after all. Wednesday told Thing that it would live to write another day. Thing nodded, accepting the sort of apology, and scuttled back to his resting place on the bed for some well-deserved beauty sleep. When Wednesday confessed that she hadn't even studied for the test, she'd fallen asleep before getting past the table of contents, Enid covered her mouth in horror before offering her study flashcards. But it was already far too late for any of that. Wednesday felt, as she did so frequently, full of woe, and for once, she wasn't enjoying it. Out the window, she could see a bluebird resting on the roof of her dorm. A bad omen. The next day, when the botany teacher handed back their test papers, Wednesday found that hers had a big red F on it. How could she have allowed this to happen? Wednesday paced angrily back and forth in her room that night, tossing darts at the offending test paper and using the grade as a bullseye. Enid attempted to soothe Wednesday's wounded ego, reminding her that, all things considered, she had a lot on her plate right now. Between school, her novel, extracurriculars, not to mention all the mysteries that needed her help to solve them, she was stretched too thin. It's not like she could be in two places at once. Wednesday paused mid-dart throw, her face a mask of concentration. Yes, if only. Enid had already moved on to the business of painting her nails with a sparkly rainbow polish, and she couldn't see the wheels turning in her best friend's head. But sure enough, Wednesday was coming up with a plan. If there was a book somewhere at Nevermore that could help Wednesday be in two places at once, she knew the place to look for it. The Nightshade Library. After Enid went to sleep for the night, Wednesday snuck down to the library, snapping twice to unlock the secret entrance. Once inside, she began combing through the rows upon rows of books in the secret society's meeting spot. Summoning demons, poisoning your enemies. No time for leisure reading. There was an important task at hand. Then, she found it. A spell book with an entry on conjuring one's own doppelganger. A double, identical to the summoner, in almost every way. All she needed was a lock of her own hair, a candle, and the special incantation written in the book. There was no time to waste. Wednesday produced a small pair of scissors from her pocket and snipped off a small lock of her hair, then grabbed a candle from along the walls of the chamber. Holding the hair to the candle's flame, she read the incantation inscribed on the page. The pages of the book came to life with a bright white light, and she dropped the book to the ground in surprise. Wednesday watched as the swirling mass of light poured out of the book and onto the stone floor in front of her, taking on the shape of a girl. The light dimmed, and suddenly there was a perfect copy of herself standing in front of her, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the world around her. Wednesday wasted no time introducing herself and explaining the reason for her playing with the dark arts. They would split the work evenly, and the double understood. It then occurred to Wednesday that her manifestation should have a name. She thought back to the poem that gave her mother Morticia inspiration for her name. Wednesday's child is full of woe. She already had that particular department covered. If she recalled correctly, though, Tuesday's child is full of grace. As much as she hated to admit it, she could use a little bit of grace at the moment.
I'll call you Tuesday.
Her double, now Tuesday, nodded.
That sounds agreeable to me.
The identical girls shook hands, and the bargain was struck. Wednesday couldn't help but feel relieved knowing that she had found such an elegant solution to her school problem. The next day, Wednesday woke to find that Tuesday was already up, dressed, and ready to leave. Quietly, so as not to wake Enid, Wednesday asked what she was doing. It was early, and classes wouldn't start for another hour. Tuesday calmly explained that there was no rest for the wicked, that the early bird got the biggest, fattest, juiciest worm, and several other idioms about the virtues of getting a head start, before Wednesday told her she understood and to just leave already. It seemed that Tuesday would be an even better solution to her problem than she had hoped. She wasn't just a perfect duplicate of Wednesday, she was even more motivated than the original. Wednesday stretched back in bed and went back to sleep, content to know that Tuesday had everything under control. Enid was, of course, surprised to find her still in bed late into the morning. Hadn't she seen Wednesday in the hall just a little while earlier? Yes, of course she had. But then she had a moment, so she came back to the room and decided to take a nap, and change back into her pajamas, and mess up her hair, that's all it was. Enid seemed skeptical, but she had no choice but to believe her. It wasn't as if there could be two Wednesdays out there. She told Wednesday that she was glad she was getting a nap in. She seemed a little, well, grumpy when she saw her earlier. Grumpy? What did Enid mean by that? It was just that Wednesday didn't seem her usual self. Not that she's one who could ever be described as chipper. But that morning she had been especially rude, practically pushing past her and telling Enid that she had no time in her life for petty distractions. Wednesday managed a quick apology for her behavior, even though it wasn't technically her, and Enid left her to continue her nap. Wednesday wondered if there was something wrong with Tuesday, but no. How could there be? She was a perfect doppelganger. She was just in a rush to get to class, and Enid had gotten in her way. She'd talk to Tuesday about it later. With Tuesday handling her schoolwork, Wednesday was able to focus on her extracurricular activities. She attended her fencing lessons every morning, practiced her cello every night, and spent the time in between steadily working away on her mystery novel. The rest of the week flew by, and before she knew it, the weekend had arrived, and with it, infinite possibility. Perhaps she would arm wrestle with Thing, or go foraging for poisonous mushrooms. Maybe she and Enid would go into town for a cup of coffee and a visit to the antique store to admire the taxidermied squirrels. Wednesday expected her Saturday morning to begin with Enid's favorite bubbly pop music blaring from the speakers on her side of her room. But instead, the only sound she woke up to was a pounding noise coming from Enid's closet. Wednesday walked across the room and opened Enid's closet door. Inside was Enid, with her hands tied behind her back and a sock stuffed in her mouth. Wednesday immediately pulled a sock from her mouth and asked Enid what happened. With fear and tears in her eyes, Enid responded,
"Why did you do that to me?"
Wednesday was confused and told Enid that no matter how bad her music sounded or how bright her nail polish was, she was her friend and would never ever do such a thing. Enid was still scared and asked Wednesday why she was lying to her. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces slid into place in Wednesday's sleep-addled mind. Tuesday must have been responsible.
"That wasn't me. Let me explain."
She filled Enid in on her plan to attain a work-life balance, and in turn, Enid filled her in on what she had been regrettably unaware of for the previous few days. She told her that Wednesday had been acting weird, bad weird, not the good weird that she usually was. They needed to get moving, though. If Tuesday was trying to mess things up between the two of them, who knows what else she had been up to. Enid and Wednesday spent their Saturday running all over Nevermore's campus, putting out fires both literal and metaphorical. Instead of writing Wednesday's paper on the history of witchcraft, Tuesday had written a detailed description of the ways in which she would eliminate each member of her teacher's family. In art class, she had deliberately splashed red paint onto a portrait that Wednesday and Enid's friend Xavier had been working on all semester. She had even smashed the hive belonging to some of Eugene's favorite bees. Almost everyone on the campus had a Wednesday story about her campaign of terror, Some students and teachers even tearfully recounted an episode where Tuesday, wielding a sword, had chased them down a narrow corridor while laughing maniacally. While Wednesday was working on bettering herself, Tuesday had been sabotaging Wednesday's academic life and her personal relationships.
Mother was right.
Wednesday sighed heavily.
Doppelgangers are much more trouble than they're worth.
Enid asked what they were going to do. Wasn't it obvious? They had to destroy her before she destroyed Wednesday. When Tuesday returned to the Nightshade Library to meet with Wednesday and go over the week's work, she found Wednesday waiting with a ceremonial wand in her hand and a circle of salt on the floor.
Hello, Tuesday.
Tuesday asked what Wednesday was doing. She explained that she was facing her problems head-on. Tuesday had broken their agreement and interfered in her personal life. She had damaged what little reputation she had at this school.
Don't you see? I've done all this for you,
Tuesday told her.
For us.
She told her that they didn't need this school, these so-called friends. All they needed was each other. Think of what they could accomplish together. They could bring the world to its knees.
An evil twin? Seriously? How derivative,
Wednesday told her.
I believe this arrangement has run its course. If you won't join me,
the evil twin said,
then I'll just have to replace you.
Tuesday grabbed for the wand, hoping she could use it to disintegrate her creator, but Wednesday dodged her strike and pushed Tuesday back into the circle of salt. Once inside, Tuesday could not get back out. Magic had locked her in place.
Wait, stop!
The doppelganger cried. Wednesday ignored her, raising the wand and pointing its tip right at her confined evil twin. Wednesday recited the incantation from her spellbook, sending a ray of magical energy out of the wand as Tuesday yelled in protest. Wednesday watched as Tuesday dissolved into light once again. Then she was alone. No more Tuesday. Back in their room, Wednesday and Enid sat on their respective beds, exhausted from the day's events. Enid told her that the next time Wednesday was feeling overwhelmed, she could just, ask her friends for help, instead of making a clone.
Doppelganger,
Wednesday replied. Having been humbled by the experience of creating, taking advantage of, battling, and eventually destroying her own magical evil twin, Wednesday knew one thing. From now on, when her roommate offered her study flashcards before a test, she'd definitely say yes.